Thank you so much for coming. So most of you know me as Marcy, EIR, right? Expert in residence here at mHUB, focusing on product and strategy and entrepreneurship-related stuff. I also teach product discovery, so if you have not heard about that yet, John is actually also very passionate about the user and the customer, so he'll back me up that you should be coming to those classes, even if you're an engineer. I also was the co-founder of Equilibria, so if anyone's familiar with that. And currently, I am the founder of Solve for Z, an innovation studio focused on ignored problems. Our first product is reinventing CPAP therapy. So good stuff, and obviously very relevant because we're using Onshape. So yay! And this is John, who I believe everyone knows is the founder of SOLIDWORKS and Onshape, right? You're all here for that. And has had 2 9-figure exits since 1995. Can we get a little clapping for that? Okay. Right? That is a really big deal. And what you probably didn't know is that that John is a born and bred Chicagoan, right? He grew up less than 10 minutes away from me. And he's from Rogers Park, and he's a Cubs fan. So I just want to give everyone like a little shout out for that. But before we get started, I'd love to see a show of hands. Who is an engineer? Oh, nice. Okay. Who's an entrepreneur? Wow. Who's a designer? Who's a Cubs fan? Okay, thank you. Who's a blackjack player? Ooh, we got a couple. If you didn't know, I mean, you must know, but John loves him a good game of blackjack, and actually his famous track record is part of how he paid to start SOLIDWORKS in the first place, so I'm sure we will touch on that a bit. But so while we know a ton about John's successes, I was hoping we would start with, the startup that didn't make it. We talked a little bit on Friday about, what would be good topics for everyone here, and I think we've got a healthy mix of engineers, designers, and entrepreneurs. We like to talk about the stuff that didn't work, failure or otherwise, because we learn from it. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the startup before SOLIDWORKS.
Great, thanks for asking, because people don't know, and it's a really important part of the story. First, let me say, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And congratulations on we got a short tour before this. I had visited the old mHUB space, and this space is amazing.
Thank you.
It would be amazing to see it anywhere, but to see it here in my hometown of Chicago is really special. So congratulations on that. I hope this space is the launch point for, maybe it already has been and will be, for many new great products and companies and many people will benefit from it. So that's great. So my first company was called Premise. I doubt anyone has heard of it. We had a product called Design View. And I learned a ton. We worked very hard. We raised venture capital, which gave us I'd say a false sense of success, because there's this feeling that when you raise venture capital, wow, you've made it, but of course you really haven't made it. It's just...
Now the hard work starts, right?
Yeah.
Were you out of MIT at this point?
I was a staff member at MIT, and they allowed you to take a class, and I took a class in entrepreneurship, and then wrote a business plan that we ended up starting for this product. And it was roughly a product design view that was a product. It was what you'd think of as the sketcher from a modern CAD system. If you've used Onshape or SOLIDWORKS, the sketcher part as a standalone product. I won't get too much into it. I'll just say it was on Microsoft Windows, and this was shipped we started the company in 1987 and shipped the software in 89 and struggled to sell it. I thought it was going to be great. My friends all said it was fantastic. Maybe some of you have had this experience. You're nodding your head. And then very few people bought it. So some lessons I learned was, I learned a lot about just building a product. I learned about the difference between people who like something and people who buy something. And when you pay for that lesson with, a couple years of your life working really hard and discover there isn't a lot of sales there, it's a powerful lesson between liking and buying. I learned about raising venture capital. I learned about managing burn rates. I learned a lot of useful lessons, and that set me up to, then try again, I guess.
I mean, I just to double tap on the user and customer thing, anyone who's ever worked one-on-one with me or been in one of my classes knows that I'm a huge proponent of like the customer/user is the key to everything. Like, you know, you live and die by that, like innovation does. And so it sounds like, you know, what you were referring to is what we frequently call ugly baby syndrome, which is that you built something and then you said, friends and family, look at this amazing thing. And they're like, yeah, John, it's great. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But the reality is that no one you know wants to tell you that your baby is ugly.
Well,
so,
you know, that's true. But if I may, you know, what you learn is what's important about is whether people buy it. They don't have to like it. Like how many here buy auto insurance? You know, I do. Anyone like it? Like, wow, auto insurance is amazing. You know, and we all buy it. And so we buy things that are ugly. Like I buy a lot of products that I think are very poorly designed, and I'm like, oh man. And you know, who has time to complain or whatever? And you know, you have these horrible user experiences, like you know, the cable company or whatever, and we all put up with it sometimes because there's no alternative. And so what I learned is, liking, it could be that it could be an ugly baby, but there's various forms of that where people really do like your product, but they're not going to buy it, you know, and there's a lot of things people buy, and so I always say, you know, beta testing. If you go to beta test, one of the things you should be testing is the customer's wallet. You know,
yes.
I thought a lot about buying, and we talked about this in the call. I'll just say a few things about buying. Like I'm trained as an engineer. By the way, I went to Eugene Field School near the Morrisell on Ashland Avenue, if anyone knows
Rogers
what it is.
Park.
What?
Rogers Park,
Rogers Park, class of 75. And, by the way, I want to welcome a really special guest here is my sister, Heidi Hirschtick, who is sitting right there. And she's my younger sister, and she lived there with me and went to field school with me. And yeah. And I learned a lot. I wanted to, some of the messages, if I may, I'll get into some of these messages. We talked beforehand about some things that I think may be interesting to you. Any business you start, you need customers. Whatever business you're building, you might be building hardware or software, it might be complicated, you might be building services. There might not be any hardware or software. You need customers. You need people who are going to buy things. Buying is a human decision made by people. Computers don't decide to buy things, people do. And one of the messages I wanted to give you is that you may think, a lot of times first-time entrepreneurs think they don't have any useful experience with buying. I get this sometimes. Well, John, I've never actually sold products, you know, because I haven't been a high-tech salesperson or entrepreneur. But actually, if you've worked in a job, how many of you have worked in a job around people buying things? It could be working at McDonald's at the counter. It could be, in my case, in Heidi's case, working at an ice cream parlor, or more profoundly, working with our father selling stamps on the weekend to collectors, you know, at little stamp shows around the Chicago area. If you've been around people, and you might say, well, John, I haven't done those things. My summer jobs were all like, you know, not around people buying things. I worked hanging drywall or whatever. But I'll tell you one thing, we're all buyers. We all have experience buying. So you all have experience already, a lot of it, around the most crucial thing that will affect your startup, in my opinion, which is, will customers buy what you have to sell? You know? And so think about that. And so in my case, learning it from the stamps, and I think that gets honed over time, and you never know either. Even the best people, the reason you come partly to sessions like this is even the most experienced entrepreneurs, and thank you for the kind words, you know, we don't know if the next idea will be a success or a failure. We don't know that. We don't, you know, nobody knows that. You know, and any entrepreneur is like that. So you've got to get comfortable if you're starting your company. I got comfortable with the idea that essentially, while my first company wasn't a success, that failure lived in the same neighborhood with successes. Does that make sense to you? Like, the big successes and big failures live in the same neighborhood, and both are very far from the other extreme, which is not trying to do either, you know, and sort of. So you got to get comfortable as an entrepreneur that if you're going to find successes, you're going to find some failures too. You're going to open, you know, you're going to scratch some tickets at the entrepreneurial lottery, and some of them are going to win and some aren't. And you got to get comfortable with that. because no one knows how to make them all win, and no one knows how to look in advance. Can you guarantee you can look at a plan and say it's successful? And how many plans have you looked at? 1,000?
For sure.
No one knows, so.
I mean, I've worked on like over 30 products at this point, and like, you know, I think I've got a decent gut intuition for it, but it's so different every time. And so, you know, this idea that you talk to the user, you talk to the customer, and you can essentially figure out, like, is this problem worth solving? Does someone care enough about this for us to solve it? And then will they spend enough money to solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
And so it sounds to me like if you could go back in time, you might have talked to some potential users a little more.
I might have thought, by the way, I have like a million little observations about entrepreneurship. You'll have to guide me to the interesting ones. But I might have thought more about the risks I was taking. I don't mind taking risks, but I mind taking risks that I don't know I'm taking. That bothers me. Like if I'm taking a risk and I know it, that's, so I think I would have been more aware in the first startup that we were going after a market that didn't really exist yet, a potential market, not a market.
Yeah.
You know, like in my first company, there was no market, and today there really isn't much of a market for a sketching tool. There's a market for CAD software, hence the reason in the next startup I said, okay, I'm not going to take that risk of a market not existing. Not doing that risk again. Now, that's the good news. You know what the bad news is? Guess what every market that exists have? What's the one thing any market that exists has a lot of? Competition with a capital C, okay? Like you know, building a new CAD system, all right, with SOLIDWORKS and Onshape, we're taking on some big competitors. Yep. And we had to gear up for these major competitive battles, and at least we knew that's what we were getting into, you know, and so we took that risk on. I think in my first company, I never really thought enough about the risk of market existence. So it's okay to go after a market that doesn't exist. I mean, a lot of you are doing that. How many of you are planning a product where you'd say, I'm going after a market that doesn't exist yet? Okay, plenty of you are. Okay, great, no problem with that. Just make sure you understand that one of your risks is, does the market exist? And your only risk, your risk is not only will the product work. Sometimes we get obsessed with, oh, my only risks are if the product works, and then you build it, like in my first company. The thing I'll say is, in my opinion, many entrepreneurs say this line, there's a huge market and no competition. And one message I have for you is, there is no such thing. There is no huge market that has no competition. That's a way of fooling yourself. Like, oh, there's a huge market for, you know, whatever it is, for microphones, but there's no competition to my microphone. Yeah, that's dumb, okay? Then you say, you know, you're not facing either risk. If there's a huge market, then there's competition. They may not be as good as you, but you're gonna have to compete with them.
For
and
sure.
So, anyway.
Yeah, no, I definitely, again, anyone who's attended my workshops, we talk about, you know, competitors and alternatives, and sometimes how looking at what they're doing and then revealing what they're not doing is how we figure out what to do next, right? Like that's the pattern of opportunity. Like, well, gosh, everyone's doing this. Like, why isn't anyone doing this? And so it sounds to me like that's kind of where SOLIDWORKS came from, right? Like you identified that there were things that needed to be better.
Yeah.
And different, and so you kind of went on your way. So I would love to dig in more about, like, I mean, yes, you should absolutely tell us about how Blackjack did fuel part of SOLIDWORKS, because I think that's amazing.
Okay.
But you know, going on from the first project into this, like kind of that story, I would love to dig into.
Yeah. So we sold the first company premise for really small money to Computer Vision. Anyone know the company Computer Vision? All right, yeah, go CV. And at one point, by the way, the #1 CAD company in the world. Now, nobody here would think of Computer Vision as #1 CAD company in the world. It shows you that, and at the time, an unstoppable force, you know, 40 years ago.
Yep.
And so one of the things about being, I won't say older because we're not supposed to talk about age in employees and things, right? We all know that, and that's not a good thing. But let's say having had the perspective view of a longer career, later stage of my career, seeing decades go by, you see changes that felt impossible that happen. So where were we here on
How did SolidWorks come to be?
oh yeah, how did SolidWorks come to be? So okay, so I loved CAD. I'd been in CAD business for 11 years or so when we sold Premise, and I thought I called up my friend Axel Bishara, who I actually had breakfast here with this morning at IMTS, which is why I'm in town. By the way, IMTS, great show. Really, I encourage many of you should find the time to get down there. And maybe, is mHUB participating at?
I'm not sure. With
Might be an interesting
place, right?
thing. Let's tell our friends at IMTS that they should let mHUB participate at no charge or something. Come on, and because it would be good for them and good
We
for
are
you.
a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So.
So IMTS has plenty of companies paying them a lot of money. Ask us how we know that, right? so anyway, back to this. So I had called Axel and I said, I don't want to be in the CAD market anymore. It's too hard. I was discouraged. I said, I'll work on anything else, but no more of these CAD systems. But the more I thought about it, I had come to know at Computer Vision, let's see, I'll give you the short form of the story. There was a very successful startup called PTC. PTC, where I work now, by the way. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay, but at the time, PTC was, PTC and Pro Engineer, and it was the first 3D CAD system that really worked. Okay, now you have a choice. You can use SolidWorks, but some of you may use Onshape. Yeah, and there's other systems you can use, but all of them really trace their origins to the paradigm set down by PTC's Pro Engineer. Unless you think I'm just a PTC fan person now that I work there, I said this even when I was at SolidWorks. If I were back in my SolidWorks days as running SolidWorks, I would have said the same thing. I got to tip my cap to PTC. They figured out how to make a 3D CAD system work. And we were getting our butts kicked at Computer Vision by PTC. They were selling to a lot of customers. And I went out, I said, I'm going to go talk to the customers we've lost. People were like, you should go talk to our customers. I said, I'm going to go talk to the ones who we've lost. And I went and talked to them, and they showed me what they were doing with PTC Pro Engineer. And I said, you know something? You gotta see the world as is. I said, that is the right technology. It's amazing. It was just amazing to me because I knew so much about CAD. It was amazing to me to see a product that real users could use so powerfully. So, okay. So I saw that, but I also, at the same time, was looking, I've always had an interest in computers dating back to high school, and originally electronics. When I was at the field school in the 70s, I had a friend, Mike Sullivan, Heidi, you'll remember, and Mike got me into electronics, and I was fascinated by electronics. I would build little circuits, a radio and stuff. That led me to an interest in computers. And I was interested in Windows and PCs. Now you're going to say, well, what's the big deal with that? Well, at the time, nobody, and I mean nobody, thought Windows and PCs would have any use in engineering. PTC, I can't make this up, PTC sold their software. Anyone want to say, how would you run Pro Engineer on what kind of computer? On a Unix workstation, Silicon Graphics, Sun, and in engineering departments, that was what you had to have. Okay, that was the rule. Now, I looked at the Windows PC, and I had a friend who worked at Microsoft, and I said, oh my gosh, this is going to get powerful. It's going to take some years, but it's going to have 32-bit memory. You may or may not know what that is. You may say, what's the big deal? Today it has 64-bit, but virtual memory. If you don't know what that is, see me later. I'll talk to you about how bad it was in the old days of programming before this. And so Windows, I could see Windows was maturing. And I thought, Pro Engineer is a good idea, but it's too expensive and too hard to use. And it should run on these modern computers. And I just felt like when the future happened, Windows would be the right place for CAD. And my friend said, well, Windows, it's not powerful enough, and you won't be able to. What about corporations won't trust it with security and all that, and how would it run fast enough, and all this stuff. And they were just naysayers, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, the chip's going to be just as fast, graphics cards are coming, and Windows is so much easier, and everyone's going to use it anyway. And they're like, no one's really using it yet. I go, everyone's going to use it. It's really obvious. All this stuff looked really obvious. So I thought about it a long time and made a list of pros and cons. And then got started on, I decided I had to try and build this thing, SOLIDWORKS. And that's kind of the story.
And I feel like that's exactly, we talk a lot here at mHUB about like differentiation and defensibility and, how can, when someone is making a purchase decision, how do they choose you instead of something else? And then how do they continue to choose you, right? Like how do you stay defensible? And I think now we know that you're a bit of a fortune teller. So when we get to what does the future look like, I have curiosity about your thoughts. But yes, of course, like PC got huge. And then
PC and Windows got huge. It got powerful the way I'd expected. Yeah.
Some very smart bets there.
What I would say also is we got really lucky, and I had a vision of a number of elements coming together consistently. One was that it would run on Windows. We were only going to run on Windows. No Unix, and I had all kinds of people say, well, we'd buy your product if it was on Unix. I say, there's plenty of good Unix. Call PTC. They'll sell you something on Unix. We're not running on it. Well, we'll buy 10 copies. No, we're not going to do it. Another interesting thing I have to offer here that I think is interesting is not only am I an entrepreneur who builds new products, software products, even though I'm educated as a mechanical engineer, my customers are all people who are building new products. So every day, and I want to call out, big shout out to my PTC colleagues from the Onshape team here. Okay, work with me on Onshape and service our customers. Every day we get to work with people who are new product developers, people like you. We don't, that means we have a double perspective on this. Yep. And so what I always say is great products, I think, are as much defined by what's left out as what goes in. That's another little lesson I'll give you. In our customer base, I see that. If you look at the iPhone, remember when the iPhone was introduced? Textbook example to me. The interesting things about the iPhone are not what was put in, all really obvious things. Touch screen, certainly not the first, okay? Buttons for volume, that was all. What was amazing about the iPhone is what was courageously left out.
Keyboard. No keyboard, no option for a keyboard. Just say no. And guess what else they left out? The memory card slot, right? Mm-hmm. And coming off the heels of the most spectacular new product introduction that had happened in decades, the iPod. What did they borrow from the successful iPod? Surely you'd use nothing they borrowed from the iPod. Not the click wheel, not the software. Think about all this. I think about this stuff because my customers do. Anyway, so the point is, what was left out? We left out the Unix. We priced it, so SOLIDWORKS was not just the software, but we priced it at the price of AutoCAD. Anyone know what AutoCAD was? 2D CAD. And we sold it only through dealers. We said, we're not going to sell directly through a sales force, only through dealers. So it was the combination of the price, the windows, the ease of use. I think we really kind of made everything kind of consistent. You made like lots of good conscientious choices there.
Yeah. And one other huge factor I forgot to mention, make sure you get really lucky. Right? Because, you get lucky sometimes. I mean, Windows got really good right at the right moment. PTC couldn't stop selling at super high prices and, didn't take us seriously.
Well, really, it's the macro environment stuff. I think like when I'm working with entrepreneurs, like I try to push on like, hey, you need to really think about the space that you exist in because you are making some big bets. And so an example would be like, you know what, like we're gonna go after PC because even though no one's using it for CAD right now, like I'm gonna place this big bet because I really feel like that's where that's headed based on what I'm seeing, right? And so for instance, like one of my startups, we were talking earlier about how I feel very lucky to be a part of a team that took a company from 0 to 8 figures of revenue in 14 and a half months. And one of the reasons that we were able to do that is that the pandemic happened. We were a company where the pandemic actually helped us grow, and so it was a macro environment thing of what those customers needed within that time, and then we were able to sort of ramp up from there. And so really, for those of you who build under a rock and you're not reading the news, you're not thinking about what's happening. I mean, how many terrible social media posts did we see from companies and founders not paying attention during, Israel and Hamas war and various other things, right? You really need to think about what is happening. That's a very serious example, but even within the space that you're in.
Yeah, and I'm going to add two more things about the SOLIDWORKS story. One is, and I shared this with you, we got turned down for investment over and over and over and over again. And there were a lot more overs, I'm for brevity, abbreviating, you know, like a lot of venture capitalists turned us down. We went to raise venture capital, and it was much harder. My first company, we raised venture capital relatively quickly. We got lucky. By the way, we had Kleiner Perkins invest in my first company. Like I said, make sure you get lucky. Okay, I'm joking, but you know, why'd that happen? I don't know, because we tried, you know, and you get lucky. Second company, nobody would invest. It was very discouraging. Okay, so lest you think SOLIDWORKS was just this easy ride, okay, because a lot of people are like, well, it took off like crazy. Yeah, well, ask the founding team when we were sitting with no income for a year, buying our own computers, renting our own office space, and I'd come back from another venture capital meeting, and they're like, how'd it go? Well, they didn't finish the meeting. I literally had that happen one time. You know, we had an hour, I went in, about 30, 40 minutes in, the guy's like, yeah, I just got to tell you we're not interested. I remember the person, I remember the fund. I won't say who. You know, and I'm like, but we haven't finished, you know, we're just not interested, you know. And then I remember exactly where I was standing when we had a really strong interest from a venture capitalist, and they turned us down, and it was a bitter thing because we were so close to getting the money, and they said, we did some research and we found this company that's doing what you're doing. And I said, who is it? And how many of you are really into CAD history? Some of you. And they said, CAD key. Anyone know CAD key? You know, it was an effing joke. I mean, and it just shows you that they don't know what's going on. So that's one thing. Okay, it was really hard to get funding for SOLIDWORKS. Now today, you know, looking, you know, in the rearview mirror, it was a very good investment for our investors, and I finally got it from. The other thing was I wanted to emphasize how much what got me through those times, like the no funding, the existential lawsuit, the competitor who came out with a product like ours that they offered in the market for free, and various other problems we had along the way, which I won't get into, I'm just alluding to. What got me through, and I think what got me the funding, was how much I constantly referred to the customer and how much I drew from my first-hand meetings with customers. That gave me the confidence in the end that I wasn't just dreaming about how a customer would react to a Windows-based 3D CAD system, but I had visited more customers than anyone I knew. I was always visiting, and just today, walking through with my colleagues, walking through mHUB, you know, what were we doing? We're talking, oh, look at that and this, and taking pictures, because I'm always learning.
Yep.
You know, and so I feel like the investor that finally gave us the money for SOLIDWORKS told me, they said, we just really weren't wild about your plan, but we had to admit that we really had never met someone who seemed to understand so many details about what their customers did with software like that. You know, like they were like, you just really convinced us. And I wrote a plan. In those days, you wrote a business plan that reflected that. So I wanted to add that deep customer stuff isn't just about, hey, we'll get the user interface right. It can be a source of confidence you draw on to decide to commit in your life, what, just as it was for mine, relatively big commitments to your venture, your career, your money, your reputation, family, you know, so many things go into it. That should be your bedrock.
It's your guiding light. Your customers, your users are your true north. What were the other reasons that they turned you down for capital?
Oh, they all were like, well, first of all, the first company didn't go so well. So that's a
You were acquired.
Yeah, we were acquired, but
also acquired in quotes.
Yeah, it was. There's a lot of forms of acquired, you know, and this was kind of like, you know, we landed, you know, the plane, but kind of with it was kind of a gear up landing, you know, like we landed, everyone survived, people made some money, but it wasn't like, you know, we sold like, well, you look at you introducing me, 2 9-figure. You didn't talk about the exit of the first company. I'm glad we're talking about the first company because, you know, the ones that don't work out teach you more in some ways than the ones that do. You didn't mention that one. And by the way, I don't like the term exit. Excuse me if I can say. I don't like the term exit. You know, exit means, why would you exit when you sold your company? Maybe you should, but you're on a mission, right? Some of you are on a mission to do something. You're on a mission to solve CPAP. Why if you have new stockholders and maybe made some money, why would that change your motivation to, I'm not criticizing you, I'm just saying as a prototypical entrepreneur, you know, you're on a mission, you're not on a mission. You know, when you start your company, you say, I'm going to build, I don't know what some of you are building, but some cool stuff that's going to benefit humankind. And all of a sudden it's like, well, we were acquired and now I'm going to do something else. Why?
Well, and that's what we call like founder fit, right? So like, you know, working on something where you can't, the can't not do reflex, how, you know, you get this problem in your head and you can't stop thinking about it and you want to solve it. And usually it becomes kind of a part of who you are and part of your mission. And so, you know, when you build a product, again, you're building a business, you know, I often encourage people to think about how, sorry, my brain just glitched. Whew. It happens, we're all human.
It happens.
But, you know, don't build to sell, right? Like, and I've done that. I've actually, you know, Equilibria was a company, we built it to sell, and then we missed the wave, and there's been issues now. So that is a very specific strategy, but for a lot of us, especially if we come from an engineering background, you know, it's a part of who we are. And so therefore, you know, I love the fact that you actually went and worked at those companies when those acquisitions happened, because a lot of that's actually pretty rare these days. You know, it's common to, you know, you sell it and then like, oh, you're on a consulting agreement for a year or two or whatever it is. Yeah, and I think that if you had the vision, once you get to your acquiring company, I mean, think about, I actually think John's contributions after they were acquired and you know, even now, right, at Onshape, like the things that he's doing, even though it's been acquired, are incredibly important, right? So
yeah, it's the same things, really. Like, I looked at the acquisition of Solid. By the way, I'll tell you right now that after the acquisition of SolidWorks, after that acquisition, I stayed another 14 years at SolidWorks. After acquisition. And now after the acquisition of Onshape, I've stayed another 5 years. Because I just viewed those acquisitions not as exits, but as a way to say, wow, we can do more now. We can maybe, you know, we're part of a bigger entity. Now, you can certainly argue that sometimes big entities screw up acquisitions, maybe more than sometimes, maybe often. Okay? That's true. But so do bad founders, you know, so do investors of any kind. I mean, there's a lot of things that screw up acquisitions. But a lot of times you should be doing an acquisition because it's going to accelerate or expand your vision. That's the best reason to do it. By the way, it turns out, little message from me, and a little advice point. Those of you who are thinking, well, John's talking about expanding. I just want to sell the company for a lot of money. Okay, if you want to sell the company for a lot of money, guess what the best way to get a lot of money is, in my opinion? Go in and talk about expanding a vision, you know? When you meet with a potential acquirer, you're all lead founder entrepreneur types here, right? Like, there are no, you know, like you're thinking, I'm talking to you as lead founder entrepreneurs. You're members of a founding team or a lead management team. When you talk to someone who's going to acquire you, I want you talking about how you're changing the world. Right. You know, when you end up, they're gonna want to negotiate. They're very sharp negotiators because they do it. The teams that do M&A, and we have a great one at PTC, by the way. They're really good at negotiating. They're going to try to extract information from you. Well, do you think it'd sell for X million dollars? It's like, my advice to you is don't even talk about that. You're like, look, you know, I'm changing the world in my venture. You know, there's the state of the world today, and there's the state of the world with your new business in it. And you're going that way, like a freight train, okay? And you're interested in talking to that acquirer because there might be a chance to work together to get there bigger or sooner. And you want to talk to the people there who can make that happen, like their CEO or their VP of R&D or their VP of marketing. Okay, the finance people, I don't want you to say this, but I want you to comport. My people will talk to your people about that. That's going to work itself out, you know? Because let's face it, if we change the world, which is what I'm doing. Did I let you know that, by the way? We're changing the world. I told you that, right? When we change the world, there's going to be so much money made. It would be, you know, we'll figure out how to split that up. That's the easy part. Don't even bother your little heads with that. I want to know how we're going to change the world together. Well, we want to talk to you about your valuation. Yeah, that comes later. I want to know what you're going to do. Are you really serious about helping us get more users for SOLIDWORKS or Onshape? You know, that's what's important.
Because again, like it's your baby.
It's important if you really believe it, and if you don't and you just want the maximum price, this is the best way to do it, in my opinion. I've been on both sides of this many times. That's the way you get the price up. That's the way you get the interest from the acquirer. You know, don't start playing the numbers game too early, because that helps them. Then they find, oh, well, when I said 10 million, he seemed to think that would be okay. You know, and that's how they work. And then they hit you with this contract with all kinds of terms, and they want to get your reaction to it. You say, you know what, I'll get my team to look at that. You know.
But it's a little like, what can you do for me, right? And then we're all in it together.
Yeah. And I'm just giving. I realize I can go on and on here. We got other topics.
I think from a time check standpoint, there was one thing I was hoping to touch on real quick before we jump to Q&A. So everyone, think about your Q&A questions, please.
Right, we're gonna go
just in terms of this world that you've sort of created and now shifted into this awesome, like, you know, SaaS and collaborative environment. You know, we're living in the age of AI. You know, where like the future of hardtech and CAD. Is there anything about innovation and progress there that you'd like to see?
Yes. And could I ask that I please just tell a little bit about Onshape, because that's a cool part of the story.
I would actually really love for you to do that.
Let me just do that, and then I want to talk about the future, because I know it's on the agenda. Okay, so what happened was I was at SOLIDWORKS 18 years, and it was great. We were acquired, and we grew, and I visit customers all the time. And in those meetings, I started to get, excuse me, my ass handed to me, all right, by customers. I remember I like talking about the cool products. Wow, you know, I went to a customer who was building these inserts for heart repairs. Unbelievable tech. Okay, I want to talk about that. Oh no, 2 hours in the conference room about, well, the installation program sucks, and we can't get our PCs configured, and we're running 3 different versions, and we need a license code server on each version because they're not compatible, and we had to set up 3 different 3 different networks. I'm not making this up. You know, blah, 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 and that's the easy part. PDM servers, files, and all this. What are you going to do about that? I'm like, I don't know. That's common. We didn't imagine it would get this complicated. You know, it's just supposed to be 3D modeling on a PC, and now they're running a global business. They got collaborators and supply chain, and my head would explode. You know, I go back to the office, and we're like, well, we'll try loading it from a cloud server. Well, that doesn't really fix the problem. By the way, you know, my competitors all think that fixes the problem. Sorry, I'm just being blunt. They're kind of, I don't know what planet they're living on, but it doesn't fix the problem. Anyway, I also saw what was happening with cloud, web, and mobile tech, and I'll try and make this short so we get to questions. You know, things like Salesforce, Workday, Zendesk, NetSuite, you know, Google Docs, basically everything cool, okay? And there are all these cloud-native systems. I'm like, wow, we could solve all these problems, and my team knows about all the problems, you know, the hardware and the configurations of the hardware and the service packs and the downloads and the, you know, and the license keys and the PDM and all this stuff, and crashes. Anyone here use any program other than Onshape, okay? Anyone here had a crash within the last day? Anyone not had a crash within the last day of use in their CAD system of choice other than Onshape? We have a few people. Anyone not had a crash in their last week of use in a CAD system other than Onshape? A few, okay. Any Onshape users in the history of your use ever had a crash? I see no hands. Okay, thank you. I made a point here. We don't crash, okay? Now I can get into why, but we don't crash. So if you like crashes, great. You know, go do it. Reboot your computer, lose your work. It's your choice. We don't crash, okay? So I saw all these problems, and I'm like, we can rebuild such a better system, but we have to start all over again. We have to go back to the conference room, back to the venture capitalists, and build the whole freaking thing from scratch. And guess what everyone said? Oh, the cloud? Oh, what about performance, John? No one's going to use the cloud it's going to be too slow. And what about security? It's just the same crap they told me about SOLIDWORKS. You'd think people would learn already, you know? And so everyone said, oh, it can't be built. Well, sorry, industry, it can be built, and it works, okay? Right? And it's not just us saying it. We have thousands of corporations who use Onshape as their backbone design and PDM system, and I hope that many of you will consider it. And so we did it all over again. Now, if I'd remembered how hard it was to build a new product, I might not have done it. Okay?
I call it founder's
But, you know,
amnesia.
it's really hard, and it's been a long ride, but it's really been fun because I get the gratitude from customers who say, hey, you're helping us build a better product, and I hope you all consider using Onshape. A little commercial from the Onshape team. We have a startup program. You can use it free here at mHUB, right? We have an arrangement or not? We should. Okay. We have a startup program where you can apply any startup, and you should all qualify. And if you have trouble qualifying, contact me, and I'll help you qualify if you're an mHUB company.
Contact me, and I will contact him.
So contact, So we have, and we'll make it available free to startups while you qualify as a startup, a poor startup. Once you've got the venture money rolling in and the revenue, we're gonna ask you to pay up, but you're still gonna save a ton of money compared to SOLIDWORKS, really. So anyway, we built it all over again. We raised venture capital. It was very easy to raise venture capital this time. I mean, we were thinking about calling VCs, and they showed up at the door, with checks in hand and, all that. I'm just saying, because once you have a successful, quote, exit, So, and then, but it's been a ton of work, and we sold to PTC 5 years ago. Now the future, I'd say 3 A's for the future. First of all, perspective view. I've been at it 43 years building systems like this, and I think the industry is half done. Okay, we're not done, right? No one looks at, even if how many use Onshape? All right, I hope you're happy, or at least not too angry, but at least happy. I just want you to know, if you look at Onshape and you love it, but you think, man, there's a lot of things I want, we look at it that way too, right, team members? We have a big agenda of stuff we're adding every 3 weeks with the upgrade, which we do for you automatically, by the way. Sorry, old CAD users have to deal with upgrades. You don't have to worry about that with Onshape. Don't have to worry about what version anyone else is on, because everyone's on the same version, the latest one, all the time. Anyway, we have tons of work to do in improving the system. So that's exciting. But I'll give you 3 A words, okay? And they are AI, additive, and agile. Okay? These are the 3 things that I think anyone who's building a product have to be thinking about. All right? Now, there's other things, but I think AI for the future is going to have a big impact on the tools we give to you and how you work. I don't see that impact anytime soon as being the nominal use case of, hey, AI chat thing, design this microphone. I don't see that. Now, could be someone smarter than me is coming up with that, or different. I mean, maybe one of you are doing that. Great. I can just tell you, in my travels around the world, and I have gone literally around the world to look at AI projects, in Croatia. By the way, I gave a talk that's on YouTube in Croatia, if you're interested, all on AI and product design. I was just in Iceland. I go visit startups everywhere. I'm really trying to see what's happening out there in AI. And I can tell you, I haven't seen anyone close to design the microphone. But I've seen 100 cool applications, and we're working on all these cool applications at PTC as well, that are in some ways, much more ready to be used by you. And we're going to have one coming out soon. I won't say too much more about it. It'll be available. And many more that we're thinking about that will help you in other ways, not by having the computer automatically design it, by having the computer be like an expert user that you can ask for advice, by having the computer do simulation surrogates that are like AI-trained simulation engines. I'm not saying we're doing all these things or not doing them. By having AI assist in programming the CAM system, which I saw happening here. There's a lot of work going on that looks very promising. Doing part search, summarizing changes in PDM, okay? Summarizing, integrating, looking at message streams in Slack and CAD edits and starting to say, here's what's going on in your design today, okay? These are all things that could be coming to you. So I think AI is going to be really big. I think it's going to be so big that we'll all be using it in product design so routinely that it won't even be special anymore. So that's really big on AI. And then additive, the thing about additive is everyone knows what additive is, right? 3D printing, we all used it. You have wonderful facilities. To me, you have to rethink your additive strategy every year, because additive is changing all the time, and I see what our customers are doing with it. And it's not only about the machines, it's about the materials, it's about the design tools, it's about the design strategies, all that. So additive is super important, and I think that you have to stay current on it. I try to every year, okay? So if you haven't seen additive this year, if you haven't gone to IMTS and looked at new machines and materials, you might have missed something important. It's not like, oh, I learned about 3D printing 3 years ago. Yeah, that's all changed. So think about that. And then the third one is agile. Every one of you, every customer we have operates in a world of more change than ever before. Whether they want to change or not, everything's changing. The availability of raw materials, the prices they buy things at, the prices they can charge their customers, which products to build, environment, social governance changes, war, politics, pandemics, okay? All these things are just changing the world around you all the time, and you cannot plan anymore for 2 years out in your product line. You have to be agile, kind of like software is built. So you need to think about a different process, and I'm seeing basically the bottom line there is hardware is getting more like software with sprints and scrums and Jira and stories, and that whole language is coming to hardware. Do you agree in your world? Yeah. I see it happening big time, even with big companies. So that's my 3 A's. AI, AI, additive, and agile. So that's my future. We're a part of it on Onshape, so are a lot of other people.
I didn't even know we were going to get a nice little shout out for agile.
Good.
As someone I've worked on a ton of SaaS software, and the two things I really want to see more of in hardtech are probably lowercase a agile in terms of how we think about both strategy and execution of work because of what I've seen on the software side. And the role of product management. If anyone has ever heard me ramble about that, there's this very clear in software, right? And to me, it's related to agile, but the intersection of the user, business, and technology, right, is product, capital P product. I'm biased, that's my life. I'm normally a chief product officer, right? But in hardtech, we see product management get taken on by people who the role isn't as well defined, and I think in order to see better embracing of agile principles, we need to see some of that practice move more into hardware. That's my 2 cents. Not that anyone asked, but on the topic of questions.
Yeah, let's hear some questions.
Let's do some Q&A. Tomas?
What would you recommend for maintaining situational awareness of your competitive environment as you're developing your product?
Situational awareness for competitive environment. I would say a few things. One is, of course, I'm going to say it over and over again. I know what you're going to say. Visit your customers. By the way, there's a difference between surveying customers, talking with customers, and visiting customers. Okay? There's a difference because, visiting is best if you can. I was taught this, by the way, in my design classes in college, and it turned out to be right. So, if you can, do what I did in telling the story of SOLIDWORKS. Don't just, you got a competitor, try and go to a customer and using them. Or if you don't want to talk about it with a customer, go somewhere where you'll observe it being used. And look around, and so that's really important. Obviously, do your homework on the web. These days, what do? I look at websites. It sounds like the basics, but do you read the websites? Look at discussion forums. The Reddit forums, we do that. We have Slack channels where we look at notes that are coming up, comparing us to other systems, what customers are saying. And then, like I said, the visits are good. Survey data can help. So you really want to triangulate. What I find, sometimes I go to our own strategy department. I'll say, hey, great summary of what our competitor announced in their earnings report or something. I don't think I'm saying anything out of school. We're a big company. We do those kinds of things. But I'll say, hey, have you triangulated that with interviews, visits, and survey data? We do an annual survey, state of product design. That tells us a lot. It's not aimed at competition, but it tells us a lot about it. So that's...
I'm such a huge proponent of surveys, so I'm totally geeking out right now.
Yeah, but as a startup, you may not have the energy to do surveys, but you might find a survey someone else did that helps you,
That too.
And eyes and ears open all the time, yeah.
Kim, do we want to do Mike or how? Go for it.
Thank you. Question for John about timing. So you just kind of described SOLIDWORKS and Onshape in a very similar way, answering some of the same questions and some of the same sort of negative sort of pushback, just different timelines. The timing of Onshape, how did you know the market was ready for a cloud native solution? What were you looking at that at the time you and the team said, now's the right time? Because the technology for cloud and all that had been around for a while. How did you guys know the timing was right, and what other things can you share with those of us who are also in technology looking for the right time?
I would say that it was about, first of all, you never know, you guess that's the right time. You have to hit the button before you know for sure, okay? So I would say it was a feeling that there would be, first of all, technical maturity in the platform. In each case, the platform barely became able to support an application like ours. Again, I should say everything I've told you tonight is as far as I know. There are other people who may know things I don't know, and I've benefited in life by competitors thinking they knew everything that I might, so there might be one of you. I also worry about the competitors I don't know about. I always say, sometimes people say, how do you feel about your competitors? I say, I'm more worried about the ones I haven't seen than anything that I've seen. There are businesses like that. So anyway, I would say the technical platform got ready enough. So in the SOLIDWORKS case, I could test the 32-bit virtual memory of Windows. This is 1995. Okay, it's going back a ways. It was in beta test, and I could see it coming together, and I could see the graphics cards coming together. I knew we couldn't have a SOLIDWORKS without the graphics cards. I should have snuggled up closer to NVIDIA. That would have been a smart move, but they weren't that popular then.
So say we all.
With Onshape, it was things like seeing 3D graphics come into the browser, which didn't happen for a while in browser land. Anyone knows about that? WebGL, I remember the day I saw WebGL was like, that was the last piece in the tech puzzle. And I saw a demo of WebGL, and like my jaw dropped. I went down the hallway, I'm like, am I the last one to know about this? And people are like, what are you talking about? I go, this web thing's getting really good. So that was the tech has to be there. And then you look at the market acceptance. You say, are people using this stuff? Not for what you're doing, but, and I think those were a couple of factors. With SOLIDWORKS, we hit the timing really just perfectly. On the other hand, we got a lot of competition. With Onshape, to be blunt, it's taken, the functionality bar is much higher, and we were probably a little earlier in the market readiness, but we're rewarded with a much emptier competitive field. There is no other product built exactly like Onshape that's cloud native. All the other products will say use cloud, and I'm not here to snow you or okay, maybe I'm trying to market to you a little bit. Please use Onshape, but I'm not, I'm not bullshitting you here, and you know that, right? And you're one of our earliest users, right? I don't know if I should say that, but thanks for being a supporter. So that's about timing. So you don't know, you guess, you look at it. A good sign would be if you see customers starting to use platforms or elements of your tech story anyway for other purposes. That would tell you it's coming.
Right? Like if someone's doing something analogous to what you're doing, you're like, oh, okay, the behavior is kind of starting to be there, right?
Yeah, one more thing, use your ears a lot to listen to how people talk. Like you could go to a customer who's using Unix workstations and you say, what other computing platforms are you looking at? And they're like, well, I don't know, nothing, And other customers go, well, there's a lot of people here who think we should be using Windows, but that's a bunch of nonsense. But Windows isn't ready yet. But people think it is, but I don't think so. We're not going to buy Windows. I'm like, ooh, Windows is heating up. Maybe it's time for Windows, So that, use your ears, use your eyes. Yeah.
Probably have time for a couple more questions.
SOLIDWORKS to Onshape. Why haven't we seen a good converter that will take parametric information from one system to the next?
This is coming.
Great question. Why haven't we seen a good converter? We talk about this customers all the time. No one really knows how to make a good converter. It's not a scheme. It's because the nature of parametric features and assembly mates are that they're highly idiosyncratic. Some of you know what I'm talking about, some don't. But it's not this scheme to lock up formats. And as proof, I'll give you a thought experiment or an obvious observation, and you'll get it. Forget about going between two different systems. There are no consecutive versions of any of the same system that read features, or parametric features, or assembly mates well enough. So, we can't get Pro-E version N+1 to read Pro E version N well enough, really. You know, it works okay, but it's not solved. We can never get SOLIDWORKS Rev, you know, SOLIDWORKS 2023 barely reads 2022 well enough, right? If you have a large assembly or something, it sort of works, but if you have 1 million data models, and again, ask me how I know this, you have error rates that are way too high. And that's the same software, let alone going from one to another. It's just a really hard problem for reasons that I won't get into now out of time, but that's why there are no examples of any two parametric CAD systems that exchange feature or assembly-made information well. Assembly mates, there are some nooks and crannies where you could argue it's going on. We could get into that. Onshape, by the way, does not have that problem going with version N to N+1 to N+2 for reasons that'll become obvious if you think more about how we built Onshape and why it's only cloud native. We can do things with upgrades that none of our competitors can do for reliability. Anyway, other questions?
Anyone?
Hi, John. I am a little sad that we're not going to get the blackjack story, but
I'm not
I do have a
leaving,
technical
so
question.
we can talk blackjack at the end.
I wanted to know, you mentioned additive. One thing that I've noticed in additive is increasing part complexity, especially with lattices. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, I believe the Onshape kernel is still the parasolid kernel, and that's a boundary representation model. If volumetric kernels like in N topology have any merit in the CAD world going forward, especially with additive. So, thanks.
Yeah, okay, so the first thing I'll tell you is, while we do use parasolid, we love parasolid, yay parasolid, Onshape fully supports mesh in a mixed modeling environment, mixed modeling of mesh and precise. You may not realize it because unlike other systems, we don't require you to do these crazy translations. You know, I was calling it nerbification with someone yesterday. Yeah, you don't have to do that in Onshape. So you may not know this, but you can take like a scanned mesh or a mesh from NTOP or anything else. You don't need to nerbify. You can bring it in and you can like drill a hole through it, and the hole will be a precise cylinder that stitches up with the mesh surfaces. This is something that parasolid supports at the kernel level, but there's a whole lot more to it that we support in Onshape. It's something we feel is an advantage over our competitive systems. Just, you know, we put a lot of thought into it. A lot of customers use this, and it works shockingly well. It's not perfect, we're not done, but very well. So we fully support mesh, and that comes out of all the alternative kernels great. Yes, I think alternative kernels, like alternative modelers, like latticing and what I'll call implicit modeling and generative design are awesome. So awesome that we're going to introduce it in Onshape soon. It's in testing now, and we could probably show you a demo. We didn't bring any demo computers, but we can demo on your computer. It doesn't matter. We don't care. Just browse. We got an old Chromebook. We'll show you generative design on it, because that's our world, you know. And anyway, yes. So we're totally believers in it. And we like it, and we have customers that use external programs, NTOP and others, and bring the geometry in through mesh or the nerbified, and we work. Many of you are like, what the heck are they talking about? And I'm sorry, I'm not going to bother explaining it all. Hopefully some of you found it interesting, and I think that answers your question. So we're quite positive on all of that. We have some great features for it.
We have time for one more question.
Everyone was too stunned by the last one.
Jim, yeah.
Yeah, how has the CAD designer persona changed? How has the CAD designer persona changed as you've sold SolidWorks to the personas then and now selling to Onshape personas now?
Great question. And allows us to focus on our favorite subject, the customer. So how has the CAD designer persona changed? From, you mean just in the era from SolidWorks till now, or going back further? Because I have extensive files, as you know, they say in the Terminator. Well, when I got into the business, there was an engineer, a designer, and a drafter, right? Or draftsmen, as they were called, drafter. And you know, with different segregated job functions, sometimes by union roles. Like the engineer couldn't make a drawing, you know, and that's all gone now. So I would say what's happened is the role of several functions has collapsed onto the engineer. That's probably the major headline. So someone asked me, hey, with all these tools and technologies coming along, is it getting easier to be an engineer? And my answer was no, it's getting harder. You have to know more. Today, if you get a job as a mechanical engineer, you better know about electronics, and boy, did we see a lot of electronics in the lab. But you better know about manufacturing. You better know about drafting, because no one's going to make the drawing for you. You're going to have to make the drawing. You know, you better know about negotiating with suppliers, because so there's a lot more expected of the engineer. Better know about software. You know, I mean, it's hard to hire someone and have them say, I don't know how to use a computer, but 40 years ago, that was totally acceptable. Today, it's crazy. By the way, the next generation won't know how to use file systems and installed software. Just a little alert, okay, coming. So, you know, a little word from your sponsor there. But so you have to teach them to use C:\/ and these crazy ways of storing stuff. That's all going to have to be instructed, because they won't know how to do it. It's like making change. They won't know how to do it. But anyway, that's the big change, is the engineer's job is kind of collapsed what used to be many functions into one. Yeah.
It's an interesting evolution. So thanks, everyone, for coming. I think John is actually going to stick around for a little
I'm
bit
staying.
to
I'm not
hang
going
out.
anywhere.
For anyone who wants to come chat and just let.
Yeah.
if we could
I'm
give
happy to
John
talk blackjack, too. But we can do that over a drink or
that.
something, yeah.
But just a round of applause for John Hirschtick.
Thank you.